So what you really want to do in the study. So once you know the protocol, then it really tells you the team that you need to build. So all the necessary personnel and the logistical arrangements. So for example, if you are going to be recruiting participants from the community as opposed to the health facility or the clinic, then you don't need to know all of that. So then together, you know what you are really coordinating, which is basically the team, who are the people that are going to be working with you, and that's very key. The places you need to go to, and you need to have a really good plan of communicating with the people who are leading those places. Because often you find that if you have a new study, there is a hierarchy of places where you need to go to introduce the study or to let them know that you'll be around and doing some recruitment. So for example, we do have to always go to the district health office to let them know that there's a new study that's going to come and start recruitment, and they will point you in the right direction in terms of the people you need to be talking to. So there's people, places, and then also you do need to have your own work plan really in terms of timelines and how you tie things together to make sure that your team is very effective. And maybe Mishek as a coordinator himself, he may also want to share one or two things there.
Awesome. Thank you, Aga. Mishek, do you want to jump in there?
Yes, I don't know if it should be Kelvin first, and then I should come in knowing that Kelvin also holds a similar role to that of Olga, and then I might tie it up together for the implementation part of it.
Yeah, Mishek, go ahead. It seems like Kelvin's having some technical difficulties with his sound.
Okay, all right. So I think I'll start building on from what Olga has said. And my starting point then would be on the protocol as well. As a coordinator, as the one now who manages the actual implementation of the protocols, I think the best starting point for a clear communication is
Sorry, Mishek. Sorry to interrupt. Can you move closer to the mic? We're struggling to hear you.
Okay. Am I audible now?
Yes, that's better. Thanks.
Okay, so I was saying the starting point then is, as Olga had said, from the protocol, is to develop clear and concise implementation plan, and to ensure that it's followed. It's easier to develop it, but following it now becomes difficult. Knowing that most of the PIs then won't be within the same area with you, it means that there is so much back and forth communication between the coordinators and the PIs, and there is a need to ensure that at least you as a coordinator, you are there on the ground, you know what is happening, but there should be a shared sense of understanding with the PI as well, and that's more communication and constant communication as well. So that's with clearly identifying what the deliverables are within those implementation plans, and then setting up meeting times and making sure that you adhere to that. That also then puts a task on you as a coordinator now to, as Olga had said, because when you're implementing, you're working with several stakeholders. You'll be working with people from the lab. You'll be working with people from the ministry. You'll be working with people from the ethical review boards, making sure that they also, those timelines are kept, and the communication on that end is also clear. And also, which is crucial, is now how do you manage your research assistants, the data collection process, making sure that the daily updates, that whenever, for example, your PI wants to have an update, you should be able to provide that update and make sure that they are informed of anything else that's happening at any moment within project implementation. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Mishek. Yeah, I appreciate it. There's a couple pieces in there that I wonder if you can expand on. So you talked about implementation plan, both you and Augustine, And then you also talked about kind of daily check-ins. Can you expand a little bit on those in terms of kind of what those are, and key pieces of those for students?
Okay, I'll start with daily check-ins, and this is with now the research assistants. Prior to going into the field, you will then identify what kind of pieces of information they need to provide for you. For example, if you're enrolling participants, they need to give in the number of people that have been enrolled. You also need to know at least how many have been tried or attempted to be reached. What were other adverse outcomes that were there? Did they meet any other challenge? And the check-ins are also one way of trying to ensure quality implementation as well. Because from the check-ins, you get to have questions on, for example, the challenges that each research assistant met within that day. And if it's put, for example, in our case, we rely on using a WhatsApp group, then that question will also be answered within the same platform, and that sends out the same message to everyone else. So the daily check-in is about the progress of the work, the challenges that have been made, and any other unforeseeable events that have been encountered along the way. It also gives an opportunity for the guys in the field to ask for supplies, for example. What supplies are currently in place, what else will be needed, so that it also helps you in planning ahead. In regards to the implementation plan, now this is if you read just the Bible of everything else, starts with all the activities that are supposed to be done within the implementation period. It might not be exhaustive at the beginning because implementation might face challenges, and for example, there might be changes depending on what's happening on the ground. But that's why there is a need that you should constantly look into your implementation plan to see the progress of the tasks that you had planned for. So the activities are the tasks that you will undertake, and then you have timelines, both the starting and the ending date. These would even help you with making sure that tasks are not falling through the cracks, making sure that, because if you just have a due date, you might end up having several tasks that you're supposed to complete, and thereby making it impossible for you to deliver. There is a need that you identify who will be leading the specific task. In particular, who will also be supporting the resources needed, and as I said, constantly checking in to update for status update, whether it's completed, it's in progress, and putting comments to make sure that others are also aware of what is happening. Like in our case, where we have got, for example, one PI and a lot of co-PIs, it's really interesting, because in some cases you'll find that the co-PIs will only chip in maybe monthly. But to ensure that everybody else is up to speed and they know the very same things that your PI is knowing, the implementation plan is a good tool for that. Maybe Olga can add a few things as well.
I think that's great, Mishek. Thank you. I think that's very helpful. And we can share in the resource section in your guys' box. Can I pause? Hopefully all of you have box, and when we do our breakout rooms, we'll check and make sure all of you are on our box for the pathway. But we can put some examples in the inbox of some of the implementation plans Mishek's talking about, and these daily check-ins, which I think, Mishek, you've done a good job using WhatsApp for that, and basically having just people who are directly responsible for implementation. Those are the ones on this WhatsApp group. And there's a format that's different for each study or each like quality improvement program of information people send to the group each day. So it's a nice little check-in. I think this kind of layering of how you communicate, right? That it's frequent, really daily communication for people who are implementing on the ground through these WhatsApp daily check-ins, more of like weekly, maybe every other week, but hopefully more like weekly check-ins with a PI, and then monthly check-ins with the entire team. I think that's a nice structure. And then you have the implementation plan that everyone can access and see at any point. It's a nice way to not overwhelm people with communication, but still keep everyone on the same page. Sorry, was someone jumping in?
I wanted to jump in.
Wonderful.
And basically, I think what I wanted to say is, I think my two colleagues have already said most of it, but just to sum it all, I think what is key in all this is really just managing and understanding expectations. And so it's very important to make sure that expectations are well understood at all levels. If you're working as a coordinator, it's very important that you have a clear understanding of what your PIs expect of you. So even in terms of communication, we have people of different personalities. There are others that would want to have a lot of hands-on in terms of happening, and so those would probably want quite frequent communication. They would want to be told about everything that's happening. There are others that really don't want to be bothered with the nitty-gritties of how the project is going, and so maybe not so frequent communication. So it's very important that at the start you have that clear understanding of what is expected. What do the PIs expect? If you are a PI yourself, you also lay that out to the people that you're working with to say, as a PI, what is it that I expect? And if you're working in a team of PIs, it's also very important then at that level also, even within the PI team, to have a clear discussion and outline, who does what are the things that maybe if there's a lead PI, would expect to make the final decision, whilst these are some of the things that other PIs maybe can go on and go ahead and implement without necessarily requiring the lead PI to give input in. So really just making sure that there is that clear understanding at the onset. Of course, it's not possible to put together all the nitty-gritties, and sometimes you learn as you go, but it's important and just at the start to sit down and have that clear outline to say these are the expectations and then move from there. Thanks, Kate. That's all I wanted to add.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelvin. Kelvin, when you're talking about ensuring expectations are clear across and that it can be different for each PI, for each study, can you talk just a little bit about that decision matrix and kind of creating clear expectations on communication for different type of things that come up within a study? I think that's a really nice, tangible way that you've been doing it.
Yeah, sure. So I would start with maybe giving examples of how certain studies would be laid out. There will be certain studies where you only have, for example, one PI. Then there is one PI, then a study coordinator. In that case, it's largely a discussion between the PI and the study coordinator to say, okay, what are the things that the PI wants to be informed ASAP versus things that can wait. So, for example, even during implementation of studies, there are things that are maybe key. Mishek has said a lot about protocol, and Olga also talked a lot about protocols. In implementing a study, things might happen in the field, and there are some decisions that as a coordinator can handle. For example, if a certain research assistant requires maybe is running low on airtime, for example, those are things that a coordinator can handle on a day-to-day basis. But things that are critical to the project that would affect either the primary outcome of the project, that are like a protocol diffusion aspect, those are some of the things that in any kind of setup you would want your principal investigator to know as soon as possible, because they have a huge bearing on the direction of the project. And so those are some of the things that I can talk about. Then I was also talking about a study where, for example, you have 2 or more PIs. In that case, it's also important to say, to know, for example, who is managing what, if you're working as a coordinator, who is managing, or who do I go to for this kind of issue? Who do I go to for this kind of issue? But if you are in that team then of principal investigators, it's also important then within your team to have that similar kind of understanding to say who is managing what, who is giving input on A, B, C, D, E. So those kinds of discussions, I think that's what I can add. Thanks.
Thanks, Kelvin. And I would say for you guys as students, I would say largely it's different for each context, but largely it's okay and it's quite helpful for you to help start these type of conversations on just having clear lines on getting some real tangible clarity on who you should go to for what, who is responsible for what. And those in busy teams, those type of details are things that sometimes just don't happen, right? Either people have been working together for so long, or it's just so busy, no one's being able to kind of sit down and intentionally think about key responsibilities, communication lines. So obviously your relationship with your team is different for everyone, but I think in the most part, it's actually a welcome add to nudge people and bring it up and try to get real clarity and tangible pieces for this. And we can share some of this kind of matrix for communication that Kelvin was talking through, share some examples for some of the studies that Kelvin has been on. Okay, next question. Related to this, a lot of our students are working with very busy PIs that have limited time. So I think from each of your different perspectives, do you have any suggestions of how students can interact with PIs who are invested, but not very responsive? And I think we've all had that experience, either being that person or having experience with a PI that is that way. Maybe Augustine, we can start with you as a kind of senior PI perspective, and then we'll go to Kelvin and Mishak.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Kate. I think there are two key things there. The PI, obviously, that's a project that they are leading. So as you say, they will be interested whether they like it or not. But what really forces PIs to pay attention is if you regularize a conversation. So there has to be, for example, a meeting every week that actually is in their calendar, and it reminds them before the meeting starts. But also we have to make those meetings interesting. So if you are just reporting the same stuff throughout, it may not be very interesting. So the way I handle these meetings, which I chair every week for 2 or 3 of my studies, is to have them regularized, which is the first point. And the second point is to have an agenda that actually highlights more on the challenges. So what's working and what is not working? What are the things that really need the attention of the PI? And that way, it does force the PI to pay attention. So because if you then say, well, we went to this health facility and we were chased because you didn't do this and that, which has happened a couple of times in some of my studies, then the PI will actually pay attention. But also, if you're coming across some really interesting things, then do highlight those again on the agenda, because so if you were hoping to recruit 10 participants in a week and suddenly you got 20, I think the PI will be very interested to see what really worked. What are some of the strategies that you put in place to lamp up your recruitment? So do have regular check-ins that have a clear agenda, but do highlight either the challenges or the more interesting things so that the PI can pay more attention. Thank you, and over.
Awesome. Thanks, Aga. I think those are really good points. And getting it in a schedule, and whether that means then you talk on Zoom or WhatsApp, whatever works best, right, for your PI, totally great. But getting on a schedule, sending reminders, And I love this idea of make the meetings interesting. I think that's a really good point. Okay, Kelvin.
Yeah, just to add on that, I think I've also found one or two things that have been helpful. One is to make a distinction on what is it that the PI really needs to respond to versus what is just an update to the PI. So on top of the regular meetings, for example, if you're sending an email, how do you phrase an email where you really need the PI to respond? What are the points that the PI needs to respond to? What are the points that are basically just an update? And so if you can either structure your emails or have a way of distinguishing those kinds of two types of communication, that has worked. One of the things that I've learned from Tom Coates, I'm sure most of you know, he always says, one email, one message. So no more than two messages in one email. Maybe it is preference, but I've found that helpful in the sense that sometimes if you do put several things in one email, it's easy for people to miss that. Other than you just highlighting one important aspect in that email to say, this is a thing that I want you to pay attention to. Others then will pay attention. They'll look at that and respond to you. And this largely applies to, principal investigators that are so busy, sometimes rarely respond. So a short email that is direct and to the point of what is it that they should pay attention to works. So thanks, Andrew.
Awesome, thanks. I love that. One email, one message, because it's true. If it's 3 different points, some that are action points, some that are just updates, the best PIs kind of stop reading after a bit, right? Because there's just so much in the day. Yeah, very, very good point. Mishek.
Yeah, so I found myself listening to what I was gonna say. Organ and Kelvin had already said, but then what I'd written down when you asked that question was packaging. So schedule and packaging. So the schedule relates to what Olga had said, and then the packaging relates to what Kelvin had said earlier on expectations. What is it that you want to communicate? As Kelvin had said, there are some things that are crucial that no matter what, you have to get your PI to see into that issue because it affects the primary outcome. So is it an emergency? Kevin has already talked about one email, one message. I also wanted to extend it to say, as Kate had said, is it via email or you send a text? Reminders, I think, good gentle reminders for that matter. You say, hey, I sent you an email and it is about this, so that when they are going back to their inbox, which has got lots and lots of email, then they know specifically they're looking for your email and there is this issue that they need to attend to. So reminders, and within those reminders, briefly describe what it is that you're looking for them to respond to.
Great, thank you.
And one last thing, Kate,
Yes.
that also just came to my mind is, in all this, please don't push all the problems to your principal investigators. They also don't want to just listen to problems. They want to see what you're thinking as regards whatever the challenge you've experienced. So don't just bring problems and say, yeah, we've got this problem. Yeah, we've got this problem. Yeah, there are problems. What have you done about those problems? What are you thinking could be done about that problem? It's quite important.
That's a great point. Yeah, when there are problems, don't then bring a blank slate. Come with potential solutions. Yeah, or potential solutions, and if possible, this is what we did to address it. Yeah, great. So based on time, we're going to go ahead and move on to talk a little bit about papers and more about kind of strategies on how to identify papers to write. And then we'll open it up for any additional questions. So the main question here is really, what would you recommend for early stage investigators, for students who want to do high quality work, but also need to publish quickly and need to publish a couple papers. So some of our students here, depending on what specialty they're going into for medicine, may need to publish 2, maybe 3 papers or have them in review in the next 6 to 12 months. So what are some kind of innovative strategies of thinking about papers? And we'll start with Aga, who has a lot of experience writing, but also mentoring students in similar positions.
Thank you very much, Kate. I think that is the process of reward after having done the work you want to see it published. I think the main strategies for getting a paper out is to have at the beginning clearly identifying what are the key research questions and how do they map to papers themselves. So, for example, when I did my PhD, it was by publication, which meant that before the PhD actually started, I had to think about this research question is a chapter in my PhD, and out of it, I'm going to publish a paper. And so therefore, you already have a research question and a potential message that you want to actually communicate out there. And so once you have identified that, then you can look for the appropriate journal or medium to actually publish it. And nowadays, there are several options. But if time is a very important factor, then you do need to look at journals that are quicker. Because some journals do traditionally take quite a long time, and others are quite quick. And also consider other platforms that are like open access and open peer review. There are several of those nowadays. And also these online archives, there's medRxiv, the one I mentioned with open peer review, for example, the fund that I normally get funding from, the Wellcome Trust in the UK, they do have an open journal where you can publish quite rapidly without going through a very rigorous process. So everything is open access. You can see your reviews. You can see what the reviewers are saying. So those type of platforms do allow you to publish quickly. But then there's a question of publishing in high impact factor journals, which nowadays is becoming less and less important. It's more about open access. So the key things are, early on, identify what is the key message or the research question, and how is it mapping to a potential publication, and therefore the journal that may actually publish that work. I do use once in a while an online platform for identifying a potential journal called Journal Name Estimator, GEN. I think that's what it is called, GEN. And it does give you, so if you write just some random text regarding your research question or the message that you want to get across, and if you shuffle it into that web page, then it comes up with some suggested potential journals for you. And so you can then look through and see which ones might publish quickly or which ones take a longer time. Thank you, and over.
Great. Thank you, Aga. That's super helpful. And I put in the chat some of those names that Aga was talking about, so you can see them there. And I think maybe just one thing to add to that, as you're identifying your research questions, if it's a public health program, what is super interesting and new about the programming you're doing? It's the same type of process, right? What is new, what is interesting, and then then you use that as your research question to write up. If there is a long time between starting the study and actually having data to do those papers, you can also think about think pieces, whether it be a kind of literature review on the topic. It could be a think piece about which is just like a page, 2-page, about identifying the main problem and just getting it out there. You can do brief reports that maybe are specifically to either your recruitment strategy, or you can do it about methodology. There's so many different options actually. And I'll post in the chat a nice description of like 10 different journal types or article types that you can think about that can fit within various timelines or periods within your study. Some that you can do right away, some that you would obviously do at the end of the study when you have data. Kelvin, Mishek, anything you want to add in terms of manuscripts?
Let me add on. I think you've largely talked about the most of the important and key things. I just wanted to comment on the actual writing process and just share one or two things that I found. And for me, I think one of the important things that I found is literally thinking about the writing process. For example, there are all those sections. Which sections do you start with, for example? And I found starting with the results section most important, because when you have your results, at least that tells you how then the other sections can be framed. Otherwise, you might do all these literature review, do all the methods, then you go to your results, you find that somehow your results and what you have in your introduction are not talking to one and the same. So you have to go back and redo. So just thinking about really which sections do I start with, but also recognizing that most of the papers in public health are not just you and you alone. Maybe you'll be working with other people. So thinking about what is it then that what is the role of the other people that you're working with on that paper, and utilizing that resource and not just heaping it all on yourself. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. That's a great point. And I think it's a really good point in terms of how to move your papers, whatever they may be, in a linear fashion and make it as kind of expedient as possible. Always start with the results, then methods. We actually do it kind of in a funny way, right? We start results, methods, discussion, and then fill in the intro last. Everyone has slightly different ways, but I think the point of start with your results is really good. Mishek, anything final to add?
Yeah, I wanted to say, first thing is to realize that there is no time for writing, as in you won't find time to write. So you need to create it. Specifically when you'll be doing several other things, you are also part of the implementing team. You won't find time that is just there for you to say, oh, now this is time for writing. So as soon as you can, as Kevin had said, start writing. Depending on the data that you're using, for example, if it's qualitative work, which is what I'm usually working on, is ways of how trying to say, okay, there is a process, for example, transcription and coding and everything else. There are techniques like using structured memos, where you still have an idea of what your data is talking about, and it can help you to start the writing those sections. That is very helpful. I will also talk about what Kevin mentioned, because most of us will be first authors, and there will be a last author and other co-authors that are within that are on that paper, and they have also other stages. What do you share and when do you share? Making sure that you're not just dumping 17, 20, or 50 pages for one person to review. You need to make sure that you need to methodically share your thoughts. For example, within the very same results section, if you've written 3 or 4 pages, share it out. Depending on time, depending on the agreement that you have with the other co-authors, that also makes it easier for you to get feedback, and then it also aids you with progression. Because if you send out one big large document, it might be difficult for the authors to review that, depending on the other things that they do, and get back to you, and that also causes delays in the writing process. Thank you, Kate.
Awesome, great point. And I think something along that you've started doing really well is making it very clear what specific questions or feedback you're looking for from authors in the email and then also in comment section throughout the paper. So for people who are really busy, at least they'll see like, okay, these are our two big sticking points I definitely need you to look at. And that's super helpful to help frame for your co-authors what to focus on. Great. Okay, we are very near time. I want to open it up if there are any questions from people on the Zoom, from our students. And I'm so bad at seeing. Okay, let me see if I can see hands. Vegeta, if you see hands, feel free to.
Nothing so far.
Cool. As we're waiting, I have a bonus. I have two bonus questions that are my favorite. So if people have questions, jump in, interrupt me. But I think my bonus questions I always find interesting is what 1 to 2 characteristics do you want to see in students for them to be successful when joining your team? And then the flip side of it is a lot of these students maybe move on to become PIs at some point. What 1 to 2 characteristics do you want to see in a PI for their team to be successful and collaborative? So if you have thoughts for either student or PI, kind of key traits that they should have. And I'll let you guys just jump in if anyone has key thoughts for that.
Yes, but I wanted to, I couldn't wait to start that off. So in a student, what you want to see is what Kevin, I think, touched on. Somebody who is a self-starter, they have real passion, self-motivated to actually complete tasks. So they are starting on tasks themselves. They're coming to you to finish off what they started. When they face challenges, they are able to act within what they are allowed to act. And these other things, they can escalate to you as a PI with possible solutions. So you are having a discussion, not from zero, but they have already thought through how to go about things. I mean, research obviously is about getting really obsessed about a particular idea and trying to find solutions. So you want somebody who wants to really transition to become independent. And those traits do show off right at the beginning as well. And these are also required for API on the flip side. They have to be interested in the idea, in the project. That's why in the first place they secured funding to actually answer the question. So you can almost say the same for the student as well as for the PI. They have got to be interested, show up when they are supposed to show up for meetings, and show leadership, and take real leadership in terms of the research itself. Thank you.
Awesome. Really good points, Augustine. I'm taking notes. I think those are really, and I like that it's the same characteristics across for both student and PI. I think that's really telling. Yeah. Calvin or Mishak, anything to add to that?
I think largely what Okas already said. The one thing I would add on the side of the PI is that ultimately one also has to recognize that the team that they're working with needs to grow. And so the PI, it's important that the PI always makes sure that they're providing a platform for the team to grow. So it's important in that regard. But also then on the flip side, then it's you also demonstrating that you have the ability to grow. And so how do you demonstrate? It's through looking at being interested, as Okas already saying. You have to be invested in what the project is. And you show that by the questions that you're asking, but also sharing your thoughts on how the project can be improved. It demonstrates that you are really invested, but we also understand what's going on. And really never shy away from, sharing your thoughts, your open thoughts, even on aspects that maybe the PI says this, but if you think otherwise and you think that might not be a good decision, it's always very important to speak that up, because then it demonstrates you understand. You're not also just following instructions, but you're thinking things. Thanks, Anna.
Great. Thank you, Calvin. Yeah, it's a really good point. And I would just completely agree to be as open as possible in a respectful way, right? But be very open with your thoughts. Because as a student, you're probably being able to put a lot more time to thinking about this project than your PI, right? And we really rely on our teams who are deeply embedded within the project to think critically. Yeah. Mishek, any final additions to that?
Well, I think one is if that's the path they're going to take, it's knowledge, reading more, understanding more, and developing a set of resources, including networks. I know with Discovery, that means those are the first networks that I developed. One thing that I've seen from successful PIs is that they have got easy collaborations because of the networks that I have developed. So as you are growing, you need people that you can link up with in terms of collaborations, and those networks starts now, making sure that wherever it is you go, wherever way you're working, you are establishing yourself. Say, as Kevin said, you're making yourself seen in those environments. You're contributing, and therefore you're easy to be remembered. And then you've shown the value that you have. The people that you're working with know the value that you have, and it's easier for you to work with them again. So where do you get what? The resources, the skills, what do you learn from who? And that's the whole point of being a PI, I think, knowing who's going to help out on what and how we can go about doing some things. You may not know everything else, but if you know and if you're equipped with certain skills, you'll be able to overcome and become a great and successful PI as well.
Awesome, thanks. I think that you had a real gold nugget there around networking and building your network. And just for you guys as students, I think that can and should be a kind of core output of your discovery time is starting to develop some of your own networks and community within the field of global health, because those, and not to take that lightly, because that building that is such a valuable tool, not only for being able to conduct research or programs, but to just have people that you can go to and ask questions to, and that you start building kind of a cohort or community. And I think this is a really unique time for you to be able to do that. So as you're able to attend meetings, do introduce yourself, ask if there are connections that your team on the ground or your UCLA mentor can help make for you. Because sometimes we just don't think about it, right? We just get too busy. But I think that's a really critical piece to developing into your own independent investigator. Okay. Thank you, Augustine, Kelvin, Mishek, thank you so much for your time. This is super helpful. If there's any one burning question, we can take it. Otherwise, we'll let our guest panelists go and we'll transition to check-ins. Awesome. Thank you guys very much. Really appreciate your time.